South Africa, there are many doubting Thomases. Oh, but they are reducing by the number. They are reducing because when they watch the EFF in the National Assembly of South Africa, they are reducing by the number. They are reducing by the number. Because when they watch the EFF, they do not only see courage, they see passion. And they fear courage and passion. But we must instill fear in them, because it is only when they are fearful that they will begin to give way. And when they begin to give way, then we will begin to conquer new territory, because new territory we must conquer. You know, this continent, you know, this South Africa, which has given birth to the EFF, is the anchor of the continent of Africa. This South Africa is the southernmost tip of the continent of Africa. This South Africa is the fulcrum of Africa. This South Africa will be the place that will give good hope to the continent of Africa. This South Africa of EFF is the one that is going to economically regenerate Africa. I remember in 1980, Africans sat in Lagos, Nigeria, and they came up with the Lagos Plan of Action and said, under the Lagos Plan of Action, that Africa was going to economically regenerate herself. I remember them saying that Africa will trade with herself, that Africa will buy our own gold, that Africa will trade with our own cocoa, that Africa will produce our wine, that Africa will produce and consume our uranium. The Lagos Plan of Action did not succeed. But is it not true that failure or apparent failure is the mother of success? If it is true, we did not give up. Because I remember in 1997, on the 6th day of March, to be exact, that great African, that great Tanzanian Mwalimu Julius Kambarage Nyerere, speaking in Accra, Ghana, on the occasion of the 40th anniversary of the independence of Ghana, said, I remember, he said, that a few years ago, we doubted Kwame Nkrumah when he talked about unity. We must now apologize to Kwame. He was right, we were wrong. But we have now recognized the mistakes that we made. We will meet many challenges, but of all the sins that we can commit, there is a single sin that we must never commit: the sin of despair, the sin of giving up. EFF is the representation of our failure, refusal to give up. You know, on that day, Mwalimu said, every generation has a role to play. My generation is the generation that led the struggle for independence. Your generation must now fight a different battle, the battle of economic emancipation. And that is the battle that we are here to fight. And I remember once again, this land is in the business of producing good men and women. In the year 2013, you produced yet another woman, Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. And you gave her the task of being the chair of the African Union, and she wrote a letter to the Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah. Said, Osagyefo, we ask for your forgiveness, and that is how we came up with Africa Agenda 2063 and the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. Under those documents, we are promising ourselves that Africa shall be economically emancipated, because we cannot allow ourselves to be under the tutelage of the International Monetary Fund. We cannot, and we must not. We must not allow ourselves to be slaves of the World Bank. We must not. We must not allow ourselves to be told who our friends are and who our enemies are. and what we should and should not do. We cannot be the tail that is wagged by the dog all the time. The time has come that we must do the things that are in our best interest, and that will only happen when we are economically emancipated. You know, they say that he or she who pays the piper calls the tune. For too long we have not paid the piper. We must now pay our piper that we may call the tune. EFF, you are now telling us how to pay the piper. You are now telling us that going forward we must now economically emancipate ourselves. We cannot be a continent whose greatest claim to fame is that we are in the business of borrowing. We have borrowed for too long. We've been abused for too long. And the time therefore is now for this spirit of the EFF to spread. 10 years ago, when my good friend Julius Selomalem and his comrades in arms sat somewhere here in South Africa, and the revelation was given unto them that the last colonial question was economic emancipation. It was a revelation. And they said that we must have economic freedom in our lifetime. This idea that economic freedom is a pie in the sky that we only dream about is without basis. We can get it now. We cannot be a continent where our economies are dominated by the smallest proportion of the population. We cannot be, and we must not be. And economic freedom fighters are urging you that we must now be in the business of spreading this message to the rest of the continent. I'm now urging you, my good friend Juju. I'm now urging you and your comrades in arms. This spirit must now spread. This spirit must have a foothold in Johannesburg, it must. Or it must have a foothold in Maseru, in Lesotho, it must. Or it must climb up to Mbambane in Eswatini. Or it must go to Maputo in Mozambique. Or it must go to Windhoek in Namibia. Or it must climb up to Lilongwe in Malawi. It must go to Lusaka in Zambia. It must go to Luanda in Angola. It must go to Kampala in Uganda. It must go to Hargeisa in Somaliland. Or it must not stop there. It must go to Nairobi in Kenya. It must go to Dodoma in Tanzania. No, it must not stop there. It must go to Kinshasa. Or it must go to Bangui. Oh, it must go to Lomé. It must go to Cotonou. Oh, it must not stop here. It must go to Juba, and to Addis Ababa, and to Asmara, and to Sudan in Khartoum. It must go to Cairo. Oh, it must not stop there. It must go to Tunis in Tunisia. Oh, it must go to N'Djamena. It must go to Ouagadougou. It must go to Nouakchott. It must go to Accra. Oh, it must go to Monrovia. Oh, it must go to Rabat. Oh, it must go to Algiers. It must go to Monrovia. It must go everywhere in Africa. This spirit must go there. It is only when that spirit is present in every part of Africa that we shall shake Africa. When it is there, we shall no longer have visas in Africa. No, we shall not. Oh, when it is there, we shall no longer have the rand. No, no. We shall no longer have all these currencies. There shall only be one currency, and we shall be economically liberated. Oh, it shall happen, and it must happen. Because if it doesn't happen, we will not allow it to happen. Sometimes there are those who think it cannot happen. Oh, but they are mistaken. They are mistaken because I remember those words of the great Ghanaian James Emmons Kwejiragri. And I remember the little story that he used to tell. The story of the chicken and the story of the eagle. And Kwejiragri used to tell us that there was a chicken farmer, and that this chicken farmer had chicken, and that one day some of the chicks wandered into the wilderness, and when they came back, there was amongst them the chick of an eagle, and he fed them on chicken feed for a long time. And one day a naturalist came and saw the eaglet and said, "This is an eagle amongst chicken." And the farmer said, "Yes, it is an eaglet, but we have fed it on chicken feed for too long. It is no longer an eagle." And the farmer said, "No," or the naturalist said, "No, once an eagle, always an eagle." And he tried to put it on the palm of his hand, and it refused to fly. And the poultry farmer said, "I told you, it was once an eagle. We have fed it on chicken feed for a long time. It has lost its eaglehood. It has acquired chickenhood." The naturalist came back and said, "Let me try again." And he put it on the palm of his hand, and it flew away. And he turned to the farmer and said, "I told you, once an eagle, even if you feed it on chicken feed, it will remain an eagle." Oh, they thought that they had fed us on chicken feed. We are eagles, and we shall fly, and we shall soar, and we shall be economically liberated. And when we are economically liberated, we shall be equal with everybody in the world, if not better. And we must be. And you who are in the economic freedom fighters movement now, I am telling you, those of you who are from different parts of South Africa, go out there. Because if indeed there is a spirit, is the spirit of economic liberation. Let that spirit now descend. Let us be possessed with that spirit. Let us go out into the world and tell all the doubting Thomases that it shall never be the same again. That it shall never be the same again. Because from here and now, we are taking a solemn vow that from this generation and generations yet to be born, we shall liberate Africa by ensuring that the chains of economic colonization are removed. And you in the EFF, you the fighters, you the commissars, you the commander-in-chief, go out there and tell South Africa and the world that the next 10 years are the 10 years of total liberation. The next 10 years are the years of liberation. You know, we have complained for too long. We are not going to complain anymore. We have agonized for too long. We are not going to agonize anymore. We have moralized for too long. We are not going to moralize anymore. We have philosophized for too long. We are not going to philosophize anymore. We have intellectualized for too long. We are not going to intellectualize anymore. We are going to act. And that is why we are going to give meaning to those famous words, Amandla, Gawetu, Amandla, Gawetu, Maibuye, Afrika, Maibuye, Afrika, Viva EFF, Viva EFF, Viva, Viva, God bless